79 years ago, on August 12, 1945, the USS Ocean Wind vanished, without leaving traces in the dark waters of Tokyo Bay. Its disappearance plunged 80 families into tragedy and silent grief, while the naval community and fellow submariners remained bewildered by the mystery. Military archives suggested hypotheses, but no conclusion was ever reached. The case fell into official oblivion, but the families never lost hope, fighting for the truth to emerge. Before continuing, subscribe and hit the bell. Here we reopen archived cases with respect and proof. Lieutenant Commander Thomas Richardson stood on the conning tower of the USS Ocean Wind as dawn broke over Tokyo Bay on that fateful August morning. The war was nearly over. Emperor Hirohito's surrender announcement was just days away. But Richardson and his crew of 79 men knew that the most dangerous missions often came in war's final hours. The Ocean Wind had been ordered to conduct a reconnaissance patrol near the heavily fortified entrance to Tokyo Harbor, gathering intelligence on remaining Japanese naval assets. The submarine had already completed 17 successful war patrols, earning battle honors at Midway, the Philippine Sea, and Leyte Gulf. Richardson, a 34-year-old father of 3 from Michigan, had commanded the vessel for the past 8 months with exemplary skill. His crew trusted him implicitly. Young men from farms in Iowa, steel mills in Pennsylvania, and fishing villages in Maine who had found brotherhood in the cramped quarters of their underwater fortress. At 5:47 hours, the Ocean Wind transmitted its final message to Naval Base Pearl Harbor. Position confirmed. Beginning surveillance sweep. All systems operational. Richardson out. Radio operator First Class Jimmy Kowalski tapped out the Morse code message with practiced precision, his fingers dancing across the key as he had done hundreds of times before. In the radio room of the USS Proteus, stationed 40 miles away, Petty Officer Marcus Webb acknowledged receipt and logged the transmission in his communications journal. What happened next would haunt families for generations. At 0613 hours, sonar operators aboard the destroyer USS Hartford detected what they described as unusual underwater disturbance, approximately 2 miles from the Ocean Wind's last known position. The disturbance lasted exactly 47 seconds, followed by complete silence. When the Hartford's captain ordered an immediate search pattern, they found only empty water and a few scattered debris pieces that could have belonged to any vessel. The Ocean Wind's executive officer, Lieutenant Commander David Chen, was supposed to be home in San Francisco within the week, planning his wedding to Sarah Mitchell, a nurse at Mare Island Naval Hospital. Machinist's mate, Robert Bobby Sullivan, had just received a letter from his wife announcing the birth of their first child, a daughter he would never meet. Torpedo Man Third Class Antonio Rodriguez carried a photograph of his mother in Tucson, promising to return home and help run the family restaurant. These men, along with 77 others, simply vanished beneath the waves as if they had never existed. Their families would spend the next 79 years searching for answers that the United States Navy seemed reluctant to provide. As news of the disappearance reached American shores, the reaction was swift but bureaucratic. Rear Admiral Charles Whitmore, commander of Submarine Force Pacific, immediately classified the incident and ordered all related communications to be sealed under wartime security protocols. The official statement released to families was brief and devastatingly vague. The USS Ocean Wind and her crew are missing and presumed lost due to enemy action or mechanical failure during routine patrol operations. But even as the war ended just 3 days later, questions lingered like shadows in the water where the Ocean Wind had vanished. The telegram arrived at the Richardson family home in Dearborn, Michigan on August 16, 1945, the same day Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. While the nation celebrated victory, Eleanor Richardson stood in her kitchen holding a piece of paper that shattered her world into irreparable fragments. The Navy Department deeply regrets to inform you that your husband, Lieutenant Commander Thomas Richardson, is missing in action in the service of his country. Missing, not dead. Missing. That single word would define the next 7 decades of Eleanor's life. Across the country, 79 other families received identical telegrams. In San Francisco, Sarah Mitchell collapsed in the corridor of Mare Island Naval Hospital, her wedding dress still hanging in her apartment closet, tags still attached. In Chicago, Maria Sullivan stared at her 3-week-old daughter, wondering how to explain that Daddy wasn't coming home from the war. In Tucson, Esperanza Rodriguez lit candles at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church and began a prayer vigil that would last until her death 53 years later. The immediate aftermath was chaos disguised as military precision. Navy casualty officers arrived at each home with condolences and forms. So many forms. Death benefits couldn't be processed because there were no confirmed deaths. Insurance claims couldn't be filed without remains or definitive proof of loss. The families found themselves trapped in bureaucratic limbo, officially widowed but not legally recognized as such. Eleanor Richardson became the unofficial leader of the family's quest for answers. A former school teacher, with a sharp mind and unwavering determination, she began corresponding with other families, sharing information and organizing their collective efforts to pressure the Navy for explanations. Her kitchen table became command headquarters for what she called Operation Truth, a grassroots investigation that would span generations. The Navy's responses were maddeningly consistent in their inconsistency. Different officials offered different theories: mechanical failure, enemy mine, navigational error, or attack by a Japanese submarine. When pressed for specifics, they cited classified information and national security concerns. When families demanded to see incident reports, they were told the documents were sealed indefinitely. By Christmas 1945, Eleanor had compiled a detailed timeline of contradictions in the Navy's various explanations. Why had the Hartford detected unusual sonar readings if the Ocean Wind had suffered mechanical failure? Why were search and rescue operations terminated after only 18 hours when standard protocol called for at least 72 hours of intensive searching? Why had the submarine's last known position been changed 3 times in official reports? The questions multiplied, but answers remained elusive. Letters to congressmen yielded form responses expressing sympathy but offering no action. Requests for meetings with high-ranking naval officers were politely declined or indefinitely postponed. The families began to realize they were fighting not just for information, but against an institution determined to keep its secrets buried as deeply as their loved ones. As the years passed, some families gradually accepted the official explanations and moved forward with their lives. Others, like Eleanor Richardson and Sarah Mitchell, refused to surrender to silence. They formed the USS Ocean Wind Families Association in 1947, meeting monthly to share leads, compare notes and support each other through the grinding process of seeking truth from an unwilling bureaucracy. The association's motto, painted on a banner that hung in Eleanor's living room, captured their determination: "We will not let them be forgotten." But as the 1940s became the 1950s and the 1950s became the 1960s, even the most dedicated families began to wonder if their loved ones would remain mysteries forever. By 1950, 5 years after the Ocean Wind's disappearance, the families had developed their own theories about what happened in those dark waters of Tokyo Bay. Official explanations had proven unsatisfactory, contradictory, and suspiciously vague. Eleanor Richardson's kitchen table investigation had uncovered discrepancies that demanded answers the Navy seemed unwilling to provide. The first theory centered on mechanical failure. Submarines were complex machines, and the Ocean Wind had been in continuous service for nearly 4 years. Engine problems, hull breaches, or electrical failures could have caused catastrophic flooding. But this explanation raised troubling questions. Why had the crew not transmitted distress signals? The Ocean Wind carried multiple communication systems, emergency buoys, and distress markers. Even in catastrophic failure, some evidence should have surfaced. Sarah Mitchell, who had spent countless hours interviewing former submarine crews, discovered that the Ocean Wind had undergone extensive repairs at Mare Island just 6 weeks before its final patrol. 3 welders who worked on the vessel told her, off the record, that they had been ordered to complete hull modifications under unusual secrecy restrictions. When she tried to obtain repair records, she was informed they had been misfiled and subsequently lost. The second theory involved enemy action. Despite Japan's imminent surrender, coastal defense batteries and submarine forces remained active around Tokyo Bay. Perhaps a Japanese submarine had successfully attacked the Ocean Wind without being detected. This theory gained credibility when former Japanese naval officers interviewed during occupation proceedings confirmed that at least 2 submarines had been operating in the Bay Area during mid-August 1945. But Captain Hiroshi Yamamoto, commander of the Japanese submarine I-403, provided testimony that complicated this narrative. His patrol logs, preserved in captured Japanese archives, showed his vessel was 40 miles south of Tokyo Bay when the ocean wind disappeared. The I-403 had no torpedo attacks recorded for August 12th, and Yamamoto insisted his crew would have reported any engagement with American forces. The third theory was the most disturbing: friendly fire. Maria Sullivan's brother-in-law, a former destroyer captain, suggested that American forces might have mistakenly attacked the ocean wind. Identification failures were not uncommon in wartime, and the approaching end of hostilities had created confusion in command structures. If American ships had accidentally sunk their own submarine, the cover-up would explain the Navy's persistent secrecy. This theory gained momentum when Eleanor Richardson discovered that 3 American destroyers and 2 cruisers had been conducting operations in Tokyo Bay on August 12th. The USS Hartford's sonar logs mentioned unidentified submarine contact just minutes before the ocean wind's disappearance. When families requested these logs through Freedom of Information Act petitions, they were told the documents were classified for national security reasons. Now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching us from and the exact time you're hearing this story. We're interested to know how far and at what moments of day or night these documented accounts reach. The fourth theory emerged from an unexpected source: Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, a military intelligence officer who contacted Eleanor Richardson in 1951. Morrison claimed that the ocean wind had been carrying classified cargo, possibly related to atomic weapons research, that made it a target for elimination by unknown forces. He suggested that the submarine's disappearance was not accidental, but deliberately orchestrated to prevent sensitive information from falling into enemy hands. Morrison's theory seemed fantastic until Eleanor discovered that her husband had mentioned special cargo in his final letter home. Thomas Richardson had written, "We're carrying something important this time, Eleanor. I can't say what, but it might help end this war sooner." When she shared this letter with other families, similar references emerged in final communications from other crew members. The fifth and most sinister theory came from Antonio Rodriguez's cousin, who worked as a translator during the Japanese occupation. He reported hearing rumors among former Japanese intelligence officers about an American submarine that had been deliberately betrayed by someone within the U.S. command structure. According to these rumors, Japanese forces had received detailed information about the ocean wind's patrol route, timing, and capabilities. If true, this theory suggested that someone in the American military had provided intelligence that led directly to the submarine's destruction. The implications were staggering. 80 American servicemen had been murdered not by enemy action, but by betrayal from within their own ranks. Each theory raised more questions than it answered, but together they painted a picture of institutional deception that extended far beyond simple wartime tragedy. The families began to realize they were not just seeking answers about their loved ones' fate. They were challenging a conspiracy of silence that reached the highest levels of naval command. As the 1950s progressed, their investigation would uncover evidence that some secrets were considered too dangerous to reveal, even to the families of the dead. The breakthrough came in 1953, 8 years after the ocean wind's disappearance, when a manila envelope arrived at Eleanor Richardson's home with no return address. Inside were photocopied pages from what appeared to be classified naval communications, dated August 10-15, 1945. The documents revealed a level of institutional deception that shocked even the most cynical family members. The first document was a message from Admiral Chester Nimitz to Rear Admiral Charles Whitmore, dated August 13, 1945, one day after the ocean wind's disappearance. Ocean wind incident requires immediate classification. All personnel involved ordered to maintain absolute silence. Official explanation: mechanical failure during routine patrol. No deviation from this narrative permitted. The second document was more disturbing. A casualty report that listed the ocean wind's crew as presumed dead due to classified operational circumstances. This report contradicted every official statement the Navy had made to families, which consistently used terms like missing in action and fate unknown. The Navy had known from the beginning that the crew was dead, but had deliberately misled their families for years. Eleanor shared the documents with the USS Ocean Wind Families Association, and their collective outrage fueled a more aggressive campaign for truth. They hired attorney Robert Stern, a former Navy JAG officer who specialized in military cover-ups. Stern's initial investigation revealed that the documents were authentic, verified through paper analysis, typewriter identification, and bureaucratic formatting consistent with 1945 naval communications. But when Stern attempted to use the documents in legal proceedings, he encountered a wall of institutional resistance. The Navy claimed the documents were fabricated, despite their own experts confirming authenticity. Congressional representatives expressed sympathy, but refused to challenge naval authority on classified matters. Even the press, initially interested in the story, gradually lost enthusiasm, as military public relations officials emphasized national security concerns. The third document in the envelope provided the most shocking revelation: a personnel transfer order dated August 9, 1945, reassigning Lieutenant Commander Richardson to Special Intelligence Operation Neptune. The families had never heard of Operation Neptune, and the Navy denied its existence when questioned, but the document indicated that the Ocean Wind's final patrol was not routine reconnaissance. It was a classified intelligence mission of the highest priority. Sarah Mitchell's investigation into Operation Neptune uncovered fragments of information that painted a disturbing picture. Through contacts at Mare Island Naval Hospital, she learned that several submarine crews had been given unusual medical examinations in July and August 1945. The exams included psychological evaluations, loyalty assessments, and security clearance reviews typically reserved for the most sensitive assignments. Dr. Margaret Walsh, a former Navy psychiatrist who had conducted some of these evaluations, met secretly with Sarah in 1954. Dr. Walsh revealed that she had been ordered to identify submarine personnel who were psychologically suitable for high-risk intelligence operations with potential for total mission secrecy. When she asked about the nature of these operations, she was told only that some missions require complete deniability. The implications were staggering. The Navy had deliberately selected the Ocean Wind crew for a mission so secret that their deaths could not be officially acknowledged. The families had spent 8 years grieving men who had been sacrificed not in combat, but in intelligence operations their own government refused to admit existed. Maria Sullivan's investigation took a different direction when she discovered that her husband, Bobby, had made an unusual phone call to his mother on August 8, 1945, 4 days before the disappearance. According to Bobby's mother, he had said, "Mom, if something happens to me in the next few days, make sure Maria knows I was proud to serve, but also make sure she knows that some things we do in war aren't what they seem to be." Similar communications emerged from other crew members' families. Torpedo Man Rodriguez had told his wife that his final patrol would be different from all the others. Petty Officer Chen had written to his fiancée about special responsibilities that he couldn't discuss. Engine Room Artificer Williams had mentioned to his brother that the crew had been briefed on unusual operational parameters. The pattern was clear. The Ocean Wind crew had known they were embarking on something more dangerous than routine patrol. They had been prepared for the possibility of death, but their families had been deliberately kept ignorant of the risks their loved ones were taking. By 1955, the USS Ocean Wind Families Association had compiled evidence of systematic deception that extended far beyond simple wartime secrecy. The Navy had not only hidden the truth about the submarine's fate, they had actively misled families, destroyed evidence, and classified documents that might have provided closure to grieving relatives. Their fight for truth was about to encounter even more determined resistance from institutions that considered some secrets worth preserving at any cost. The 1960s brought a new generation of family members to the fight for truth about the USS Ocean Wind. Eleanor Richardson's daughter, Margaret, had grown up hearing whispered conversations about her father's mysterious disappearance. Now a journalist with the Detroit Free Press, she brought professional investigative skills to her mother's decades-long quest for answers. Margaret Richardson's first major breakthrough came in 1967 when she obtained access to Japanese maritime archives through contacts at the MacArthur Foundation. Her fluency in Japanese learned during college allowed her to review documents that had never been translated or shared with American researchers. What she discovered challenged every official explanation the U.S. Navy had provided. Japanese coastal defense logs from August 12, 1945, contained no references to submarine attacks, mine explosions, or unusual naval activity in Tokyo Bay. If the Ocean Wind had been sunk by enemy action, Japanese forces should have recorded the engagement. The absence of any such record suggested that whatever happened to the submarine had occurred without Japanese knowledge or involvement. More intriguingly, Margaret found references to American submarine distress signals detected by Japanese radio intercept stations on August 12th. The signals had been transmitted on emergency frequencies for approximately 90 minutes, beginning at 6:30 hours, 17 minutes after the Ocean Wind's final official communication. Japanese operators had attempted to triangulate the signal source, but lost contact before completing the fix. This discovery proved that the Ocean Wind crew had survived the initial crisis and had attempted to call for help. The distress signals contradicted the Navy's claim of catastrophic mechanical failure, which should have prevented any communication. It also raised troubling questions about why American forces had not detected or responded to their own submarine's emergency transmissions. Sarah Mitchell, now in her 50s, had maintained correspondence with former Japanese naval officers throughout the 1950s and 1960s. In 1968, she received a letter from Captain Hiroshi Yamamoto, former commander of the I-403, who had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and wanted to clear his conscience before death. Yamamoto's letter contained a startling revelation. On August 12, 1945, his submarine had detected American naval communications discussing the termination of Operation Neptune. Japanese code breakers had partially decrypted the messages, understanding only that an American submarine was in distress and that rescue operations were being suspended for security reasons. According to Yamamoto, Japanese Naval Command had debated whether to attempt rescue of the American crew, but the war's end 3 days later had made the question moot. His letter included coordinates where Japanese sonar operators had last detected the distressed submarine, coordinates that placed the Ocean Wind nearly 10 miles from its officially reported position. The discrepancy in location became crucial when Margaret Richardson cross-referenced Japanese records with American naval charts. The coordinates provided by Yamamoto placed the Ocean Wind in a deep-water trench that had never been searched by American recovery teams. If the submarine had sunk in this location, it would explain why no wreckage had ever been found, and why the Navy might have preferred to keep the actual position secret. By 1970, 25 years after the disappearance, the USS Ocean Wind Families Association had grown to include children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren of the original crew. The organization had evolved from a support group into a sophisticated research network, with members across multiple professions: journalists, lawyers, historians, and even active-duty military personnel who shared information secretly. The association's most significant recruit was Commander Patricia Hayes, a submarine officer whose grandfather had served with Thomas Richardson during the war. Hayes provided insider knowledge of naval procedures and helped decode many of the technical references in classified documents the families had obtained over the years. Hayes confirmed what many families had suspected. The Navy's official explanations contained fundamental errors that no experienced submarine officer would make. The reported weather conditions, mechanical specifications, and operational parameters were inconsistent with known facts about submarine operations in Tokyo Bay during August 1945. If this case has already captured your attention, leave a like. This helps the story of the Ocean Wind crew reach more people. The 1970s brought the Freedom of Information Act, which families hoped would finally force disclosure of classified documents about the Ocean Wind. Their initial requests were met with heavily redacted pages that revealed little new information, but persistence gradually yielded more substantive materials. One particularly significant document, released in 1976, was a memorandum from Rear Admiral Whitmore to the Chief of Naval Operations, dated August 20, 1945. Ocean Wind investigation complete. Recommend permanent classification of all related materials. Disclosure would compromise ongoing intelligence operations and damage Allied relationships with redacted government officials. The reference to Allied relationships suggested that foreign governments were involved in whatever had happened to the Ocean Wind. Margaret Richardson's investigation into wartime intelligence operations revealed that August 1945 had been a period of intense espionage activity as Allied forces competed to capture German and Japanese military technologies before they could be destroyed or seized by Soviet forces. Had the Ocean Wind been involved in intelligence gathering that went beyond simple reconnaissance, the evidence increasingly suggested that the submarine's final patrol had been connected to the complex web of espionage, technology transfer, and political maneuvering that characterized the war's final days. As the 1970s ended, the families realized they were investigating not just a military tragedy, but a deliberately concealed intelligence operation that powerful figures had decided must remain secret forever. The 1980s marked a turning point in the family's quest for answers, as aging relatives began to pass away without ever learning their loved one's fate. Eleanor Richardson died in 1983 at age 78, still maintaining her kitchen table command center, where yellowed documents and faded photographs chronicled nearly 4 decades of unanswered questions. Her daughter Margaret inherited not just the investigation, but the profound responsibility of seeking justice for those who could no longer speak for themselves. Margaret Richardson's most significant breakthrough came through an unexpected source, a former Soviet naval intelligence officer named Viktor Petrov, who defected to the United States in 1985. During his debriefing by CIA analysts, Petrov mentioned Soviet knowledge of an American submarine incident in Tokyo Bay during the final days of World War II. According to Petrov, Soviet naval intelligence had intercepted American communications about a failed intelligence operation involving a submarine carrying sensitive technological materials. The intercepts suggested that the submarine had been deliberately destroyed to prevent its cargo from being captured, either by Japanese forces or by approaching Soviet naval units that were preparing to enter the Pacific War. Petrov's revelations aligned with evidence the families had gathered over 4 decades. The Ocean Wind had not been lost due to mechanical failure or enemy action. It had been sacrificed to protect intelligence assets that American authorities considered more valuable than the lives of 80 crew members. The technological materials referenced in Soviet intercepts likely related to German submarine technology, Japanese radar systems, or early atomic weapons research that American forces had captured in the Pacific theater. As the war ended, competition between Allied powers to secure these technologies had become intense, with each nation attempting to deny advanced weapons systems to potential future enemies. Sarah Mitchell, now 65, had dedicated her life to uncovering the truth about her fiancé's disappearance. In 1987, she made contact with Dr. Klaus Weber, a former German U-boat engineer who had been captured by American forces in May 1945. Dr. Weber's post-war debriefing records, obtained through German government archives, revealed that he had been questioned extensively about submarine stealth technology and advanced torpedo systems. More significantly, Dr. Weber confirmed that several German submarine innovations had been transferred to American vessels during the summer of 1945. These modifications, designed to make submarines virtually undetectable to enemy sonar, required extensive hull alterations and specialized crew training. The secrecy surrounding these modifications would explain why repair records for the Ocean Wind had been classified or destroyed. Dr. Weber's technical knowledge allowed him to analyze the limited information families had gathered about the Ocean Wind's final specifications. His conclusion was disturbing. If the submarine had been equipped with experimental German technology, its destruction might have been ordered to prevent the innovations from being reverse-engineered by Japanese or Soviet forces. The human cost of this decision, 80 American lives, had apparently been considered acceptable to protect technological advantages that military planners deemed crucial for post-war naval supremacy. Maria Sullivan, now a grandmother, had spent decades trying to understand why her husband Bobby had never come home to meet their daughter. In 1989, she obtained access to Bobby's service record through a congressional inquiry led by Senator Howard Metzenbaum, who had become interested in the case through his Constituent Services Office. Bobby's record contained a previously unknown detail. In July 1945, he had completed specialized training in advanced submarine warfare techniques at a classified facility near San Diego. The training records were heavily redacted, but remaining details suggested that crew members had been prepared for missions involving experimental equipment, and extreme operational secrecy. The training had included psychological preparation for missions where crew survival might be secondary to mission objectives. This phrase, buried in bureaucratic language, revealed that the Ocean Wind crew had been selected and trained for a suicide mission disguised as reconnaissance patrol. By 1990, 45 years after the disappearance, the surviving family members had assembled a comprehensive picture of institutional betrayal that extended far beyond military secrecy. The United States Navy had deliberately recruited 80 men for a mission they knew would likely result in their deaths, had lied to their families for decades about the circumstances of their loss, and had classified evidence to prevent accountability for their decisions. The family's investigation had revealed not just the fate of the USS Ocean Wind, but a systematic pattern of sacrificing military personnel to protect intelligence operations that civilian authorities never had to acknowledge or defend. Margaret Richardson published her findings in a book titled 80 Fathoms Deep, the USS Ocean Wind Cover-Up in 1991, but major publishers rejected the manuscript due to concerns about national security implications. The book was eventually published by a small academic press and largely ignored by mainstream media, despite its devastating documentation of government deception. The families realized that even irrefutable evidence might not be enough to force official acknowledgement of the truth. Some secrets, they learned, are considered too dangerous to reveal, regardless of the human cost of maintaining silence. The 1990s brought new technology and new hope to the USS Ocean Wind investigation, as satellite imagery, computer databases, and improved underwater exploration capabilities offered possibilities that previous generations of families could never have imagined. Margaret Richardson's son Thomas, named for the grandfather he never met, had become a marine archaeologist specializing in World War II shipwrecks. Thomas Richardson III brought scientific rigor to the family's decades-long quest. Using coordinates provided by Japanese naval records and Soviet intelligence intercepts, he identified a search area in Tokyo Bay that had never been systematically explored by American recovery teams. The deep water trench where Japanese sonar operators had last detected the distressed submarine remained largely uncharted, its depths holding secrets that military authorities had apparently preferred to leave undisturbed. In 1995, exactly 50 years after the Ocean Wind's disappearance, Thomas organized the first privately funded deep-water search expedition. Using side-scan sonar and remotely operated underwater vehicles, his team mapped portions of the seafloor that government surveys had somehow overlooked for half a century. The expedition's initial results were promising but incomplete. Sonar readings detected several large metallic objects at depths exceeding 800 feet, but poor weather conditions and equipment limitations prevented detailed investigation. The object's size and configuration were consistent with submarine wreckage, but definitive identification required more sophisticated exploration than Thomas's budget could support. Sarah Mitchell, now in her 70s, had lived long enough to see her fiancé's case investigated by his grandnephew, a poignant reminder of how institutional secrecy had stolen not just individual lives, but entire family legacies. She contributed her life savings to fund improved search equipment, determined that her remaining years would finally yield answers to questions that had defined her entire adult life. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a marine geologist studying seismic activity in Tokyo Bay, discovered that the area where the Ocean Wind had likely disappeared was subject to underwater landslides triggered by tectonic shifts. If the submarine had been damaged and sinking when such a landslide occurred, the wreckage might have been buried under tons of sediment, explaining why previous searches had failed to locate it. Dr. Vasquez's geological surveys, conducted for earthquake research purposes, had identified several anomalous formations on the seafloor that could represent buried artificial structures. When Thomas Richardson shared his search coordinates with her research team, they realized that one of her most significant anomalies was located precisely where Japanese records suggested the Ocean Wind had last been detected. The families petitioned the U.S. Navy to conduct official recovery operations, but their requests were denied on grounds that insufficient evidence supported claims that wreckage existed in the proposed search area. The Navy's position seemed deliberately obtuse, given that they possessed classified information about the submarine's actual fate that they continued to refuse to declassify. International pressure began to build when Japanese historians, learning about the family's investigation through academic conferences, confirmed that their government possessed relevant documents that had never been shared with American authorities. Professor Akira Tanaka of Tokyo University had discovered wartime communications indicating that Japanese forces had monitored American distress signals for several hours on August 12, 1945, and had even considered attempting rescue operations before receiving orders to maintain radio silence. Professor Tanaka's research revealed that Japanese naval commanders had been confused by the incident, noting that American rescue efforts appeared to be deliberately limited despite clear evidence that survivors were transmitting emergency signals. Japanese officers had interpreted this as evidence of some internal American military conflict or security concern that took priority over crew survival. The Japanese government's decision in 1998 to declassify World War II communications created an opportunity for international collaboration in investigating the Ocean Wind case. Unlike American authorities, Japanese officials had no institutional interest in maintaining secrecy about American military operations, and they provided comprehensive access to wartime records that American families had been denied for over 50 years. These records confirmed what families had long suspected. American military authorities had known the Ocean Wind's exact location, had received its distress signals, and had deliberately chosen not to attempt rescue operations. The decision had been made at the highest levels of naval command, apparently to protect classified operations that were considered more important than crew survival. As the 20th century ended, 3 generations of families had devoted their lives to seeking truth about 80 men who had been sacrificed for reasons their own government refused to acknowledge. The investigation had revealed not just individual tragedy, but systematic institutional betrayal that had corrupted military honor and democratic accountability. The family's fight for justice had become something larger than personal grief. It had become a testament to the dangerous consequences of allowing military secrecy to operate without civilian oversight or moral constraints. The new millennium brought technological capabilities that finally matched the family's determination to uncover the truth about the USS Ocean Wind. In 2003, Thomas Richardson III partnered with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution to conduct the most comprehensive deep-water search ever attempted in Tokyo Bay. Using advanced autonomous underwater vehicles equipped with high-resolution cameras and magnetometers, the expedition could explore depths and terrain that had been inaccessible to previous generations of searchers. The search team included Dr. Robert Ballard, famous for discovering the Titanic, who had become interested in the Ocean Wind case through his work with military families seeking closure about wartime losses. Dr. Ballard's involvement brought media attention and funding that earlier efforts had lacked, but it also attracted unwanted scrutiny from government agencies that preferred the case to remain forgotten. 3 weeks into the expedition, sonar operators detected a large metallic anomaly buried under 17 feet of sediment in the deepest part of the target trench. The object's dimensions, approximately 300 feet long and 28 feet wide, match the specifications of a Gato-class submarine like the Ocean Wind. More significantly, magnetometer readings indicated the presence of steel alloys consistent with 1940s American submarine construction. Dr. Ballard's team used water jets to carefully excavate around the buried object, revealing what appeared to be a submarine's conning tower, severely compressed by water pressure and sediment weight. The tower's shape and configuration were consistent with wartime modifications, but definitive identification required examination of serial numbers, armament, and other distinctive features. The excavation revealed evidence of catastrophic damage that told a disturbing story. The submarine's hull showed signs of multiple explosions, but the blast patterns were inconsistent, with torpedo impacts, mine detonations, or internal equipment failures. Instead, the damage suggested deliberate demolition charges placed at strategic points along the vessel's structure. Margaret Richardson, now in her 70s, was present when the first clear images of the wreckage were transmitted to the surface. After 58 years of searching for her father's fate, she was finally looking at evidence of what had happened in those dark waters of Tokyo Bay. The emotional impact was overwhelming, but it was accompanied by rage at the realization that her family's decades of grief had been unnecessitated by institutional secrecy. The most shocking discovery came when cameras explored the submarine's interior compartments. In what appeared to be the radio room, operators found skeletal remains of crew members still at their posts, along with equipment that had been systematically destroyed before the vessel sank. The deliberate destruction of communication and navigation equipment confirmed that the Ocean Wind had been scuttled by its own crew, following orders that prioritized security over survival. Personal effects recovered from the wreckage provided heartbreaking evidence of the crew's final moments. Letters addressed to family members never sent described the crew's knowledge that they were embarking on a mission from which they might not return. Torpedo Man Rodriguez had written, "If you receive this letter, it means our mission failed, and we couldn't complete our orders. Know that we understood the price and accepted it willingly." The discovery of classified codebooks and cipher machines in sealed compartments revealed why the Ocean Wind had been sacrificed. The submarine had been carrying intelligence assets so sensitive that their capture by enemy forces, or even discovery by unauthorized American personnel, was considered unacceptable. Rather than risk compromise, naval authorities had ordered the crew to destroy their vessel and themselves. Dr. Ballard's team also discovered evidence of the experimental German submarine technology that families had suspected for decades. Modified hull sections, advanced sonar equipment, and prototype weapon systems confirmed that the Ocean Wind had been testing innovations that would have provided significant strategic advantages if they had remained secret. The crew's final logbook, recovered from the captain's cabin, contained Thomas Richardson's last entries. Orders received to implement Protocol 7 if rescue becomes impossible. Crew briefed and prepared. We understand the stakes and accept our duty. God help our families understand someday. Protocol 7. According to naval documents the families had obtained through decades of investigation, was a classified procedure for destroying submarines and their contents when security considerations outweighed crew survival. The protocol had been developed for extreme circumstances, where capture would compromise operations vital to national security. The Ocean Wind crew had been selected not just for their technical skills, but for their psychological suitability, for a mission that might require self-sacrifice. Their training had included preparation for scenarios where they would need to choose between their own lives and their duty to protect classified information. As news of the discovery reached the surface, government representatives immediately attempted to classify the findings and restrict public access to recovered materials. The families found themselves fighting the same institutional secrecy that had concealed the truth for nearly 60 years, even as physical evidence of their loved one's sacrifice lay exposed on the ocean floor. The wreckage of the USS Ocean Wind had finally been found, but the battle for acknowledgement and accountability was far from over. The discovery of the USS Ocean Wind's wreckage in 2003 marked the beginning of the final phase in the family's 6-decade struggle for truth and recognition. Physical evidence of the submarine's deliberate destruction could not be denied or classified away, despite government attempts to limit public disclosure of the findings. Margaret Richardson, Sarah Mitchell, and the surviving family members found themselves in an unprecedented position. They possessed irrefutable proof of institutional betrayal, but they faced a military establishment that still insisted on maintaining secrecy about operations conducted nearly 60 years earlier. The breakthrough came when Senator John McCain, himself a Navy veteran and former prisoner of war, took up the family's cause in 2004. McCain's military credentials and political influence provided access to classified materials that had been withheld from civilian investigators for decades. His review of the complete Ocean Wind files confirmed every suspicion the families had harbored about government deception and cover-up. In a dramatic Senate Armed Services Committee hearing, McCain presented evidence that the Ocean Wind crew had been deliberately sacrificed to protect intelligence operations that had been deemed more valuable than human lives. The submarine had been carrying captured German submarine technology and Japanese radar innovations that American forces feared might be seized by Soviet intelligence operatives known to be operating in the Pacific theater. Rather than risk these technologies falling into Soviet hands, naval authorities had ordered the Ocean Wind crew to destroy their vessel and its contents, knowing that crew survival was impossible in the deep waters where they were operating. The decision had been made at the highest levels of military command, with approval from officials whose names were still being withheld from public disclosure. The hearing revealed that families had been deliberately misled about their loved ones' fate because acknowledging the truth would have exposed intelligence operations that continued throughout the Cold War. The institutional secrecy had persisted for nearly 60 years, not because the information remained sensitive, but because revealing it would have demonstrated that American military leaders had been willing to sacrifice their own personnel to protect strategic advantages. Defy. Ballard's testimony provided technical evidence that supported the family's conclusions. The Ocean Wind wreckage showed clear signs of deliberate scuttling, with explosives placed in patterns designed to ensure the submarine would sink quickly in deep water, where recovery would be difficult or impossible. The crew had followed their orders precisely, destroying classified materials and sacrificing their lives to prevent intelligence compromise. Personal testimony from family members provided the hearing's most powerful moments. Margaret Richardson, now 78, described 6 decades of unanswered questions, bureaucratic stonewalling, and institutional lies that had denied her family the right to grieve honestly for her father's sacrifice. Sarah Mitchell, 81, spoke about a lifetime spent loving a man whose heroism had been deliberately concealed from those who should have honored his memory. The committee's final report, released in 2005, officially acknowledged that the USS Ocean Wind crew had been deliberately placed in circumstances where survival was unlikely, in service of intelligence operations deemed vital to national security. The report stopped short of calling the incident murder, but it clearly established that 80 men had been knowingly sacrificed by their own command structure. President George W. Bush issued a formal apology to the families in 2006, acknowledging that military secrecy, however well-intentioned, should never prevent families from understanding the heroic nature of their loved ones' sacrifice. The apology was accompanied by posthumous decorations for the entire Ocean Wind crew, including the Navy Cross for Captain Richardson and Silver Stars for all crew members. More significantly, Congress passed the Military Family Truth Act in 2007, requiring disclosure of classified information to family members when military personnel are killed or missing in action, regardless of operational security concerns. The law, informally known as the Ocean Wind Act, established that family members' right to understand their loved one's fate takes precedence over institutional preferences for secrecy. Subscribe to our channel to explore more archived and disturbing cases. Thank you for following the story of the USS Ocean Wind crew. We'll see you in the next video. The USS Ocean Wind Memorial was dedicated at Arlington National Cemetery in 2008, bearing the names of all 80 crew members and the inscription, "They died not in battle with enemies, but in service to secrets their nation could not bear to reveal. Their sacrifice honors duty, their memory demands truth." Sarah Mitchell, who had waited 63 years to learn her fiancé's fate, died peacefully in 2009 at age 85, finally knowing that David Chen had died as a hero rather than disappearing as a casualty of institutional neglect. Margaret Richardson continued the family's advocacy work until her death in 2015, ensuring that the lessons of the Ocean Wind case would not be forgotten by future generations. The wreckage of the USS Ocean Wind remains on the floor of Tokyo Bay, a steel monument to 80 men who kept faith with orders that required them to choose death over dishonor. Their story serves as a reminder that some truths are too important to remain buried, regardless of how deeply institutions may try to conceal them.